Hello and welcome to the Daily Lawyer podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today is yet another episode in our Careers in the Law series. And today we are going to be speaking about having a career in the law, not just as a counsel or as an advocate, but as someone who can do both. We have an amazing guest with us today who is Advocate Vikrant Pachnanda. He graduated from GNLU in 2011 and did his master's in law from Cornell University of the Law in 2013. While at GNLU, he founded two law magazines. One was, of course, India Law Journal, and the other one was the GNLU Journal of Law and Politics. And he's now a Supreme Court counsel and an AOR and practices extensively in the areas of dispute resolution and also in the area of aviation law. So Vikrant, you're going to tell me all that you do, especially in the area of aviation law. But before we get into that, Vikrant, thank you so much for joining us today. Like, how did you think of becoming a lawyer and the journey from a law student to today?
Well, I actually became a lawyer by default. Wanted to always become a pilot. Aviation was always my passion. But I also had air sickness problem. So because of which I knew I could not become a pilot. And at that point of time, no one had really heard of aviation law. And now it's still, of course, developing in India. But at that point of time, nobody, including myself, had heard of it. And so therefore, I knew I couldn't become a pilot. And I was thinking of what else could I do in the aviation space. And I actually couldn't think of anything, to be very honest. I was very fond of debating and quizzing and speak and public speaking, doing extempo speaking. And that's when, I decided to pick up the books and prepare for my law entrance exams and become a lawyer. Which is why, I probably had the interest of getting into litigation from the very beginning because of that zeal to, argue and speak on a forum that allows me to do so. So that is how I kind of, that's how, I got the idea and I decided to do law. And nothing really else really interested me, be it science, be it maths, be it management. So by default, I zeroed in on law. Went into law school in 2006, and while I was there, I authored an article which I sent to a law journal. And while they liked it, they said we couldn't publish it because they wanted me to either be a lawyer or write alongside a lawyer. So while I did find a lawyer to co-author the article with, however, I felt it was necessary to have a forum where students could write alongside legal luminaries, and there being not just an exclusive platform just for these luminaries. So that is what kind of came into my mind, and that kind of got me to launch India Law Journal in 2008.
How was the process? Because I think we connected because of an article that I wrote which got published in India Law Journal. But then I remember looking at the editorial board that you had put together at the time, and this was in 2010. So it was just a couple of years since you had started. And it was only an online magazine. Is it still only an online magazine?
No, so the thing was, it was actually both online and print till COVID. The idea of an online journal was there because when we were planning the journal, I met a lot of lawyers, and since they were going to contribute to the journal as well, and they suggested to me that why don't you go for an online thing? It's something new. At that point of time, there was no Legally India, there was no bar and bench, and that was they told me the difficulties of having a print copy. It goes and it will just be lying in the reception and probably partners won't get to see it. Also, by the time some issue comes, by the time it's actually printed, the relevance sometimes tends to go. So, and it was going to be a first of its kind, or probably one of the first of its kind. So I said, that sounds kind of good. But at the same time, having a hard copy also had its own charm, especially if you were an author, because I put myself in an author's shoes as well. And I realized that, when I have written an article, if I have the hard copy to show, that definitely has a better has a better feel to it than just having a printout from an online. But yes, in terms of running it, the online version definitely looked more sustainable than a physical copy. And that's when we decided that, we will print physical copies, but we will print them only for the people who write for us and give them a copy each. So while we are online, while we're easy to access and we can disseminate information as and when it actually does come, at the same time, every author gets a hard copy as well. So tomorrow, if after 10 years they would show to somebody, we've written an article, they have a hard copy to fall back upon. So that is the model we decided to adopt. And the last 2 years, because of COVID, we've not printed physical copies. But we've also now realized in the last 2 years, even though we didn't get to print physical copies, we've also seen that authors haven't demanded physical copies, maybe because COVID has made everything so electronic and so seamless that that urge to have a physical copy seems to have gone. And now we are actually thinking of, whether we need to actually post-COVID era continue with this hard copy or not, because now it's everybody is sharing things online, including people who've written articles and things like that, because everything is now uploading. So even if they were to have a hard copy, they would still have to scan it, and they would prefer having a soft copy of it. So we kind of, while that's not a decision we've taken yet, but that's the change I've seen in the last more than a decade in terms of acceptance to online, that today even authors actually don't miss having a physical copy.
That's true. But how did you get such a board together as a student? Like, how did you get,
So I kind of, I had the thing of networking from day one. So I did attend a conference when I was in one of my internships. And that's when I got a feeler of these networking conferences that happen in 5-star hotels. And I kind of kept in touch with a handful of people there who were kind enough to give me introductions. Even places where I interned, they were happy to come on board, as well as again give me introductions. So I kind of set it up using that as a base. And then of course, over the years, as one got into the profession, you kind of started, you developed your own contracts, and plus you started dealing with a lot of these councils on a regular basis from a professional perspective. So now, of course, it's very easy to, if I want to get somebody on board, and especially if I have worked with him, or even if I've not worked with him, to get an introduction, because I would probably know 5 people who know him.
I really want to dig a little bit about this networking thing, because it's something that most of us don't do. I know I don't do it at all. And I don't think we know how to do it. Forget, doing it or not. We actually don't even know how to network. But I think it's a phenomenally important skill for anyone, any profession, but most certainly in our profession. How on earth did you start? Like, you started so early, and I know that you're really good at keeping in touch, because you have kept in touch over the years with me. I have barely kept in touch with you. So how do you do it? Like, if for a person or for a young lawyer, or even anyone who's listening, if you want to tell them or give them tips on how to network or how to start, what would you say?
Well, I think it's very important to start networking from day one at law school. It's something which has to come into somebody naturally. And while I'm not saying I have it naturally, but some people get it naturally, some don't. And for people who don't, it's, if they start in law school, probably by the time they graduate, it would come to them naturally. It's like mooting. Some people, it doesn't come, speaking publicly doesn't come to them naturally, but mooting kind of acts like a simulation to help them overcome that problem or fear or whatever they have of speaking publicly. So I think networking is important from day one. And while, when we were in law school, people would, you would hear people say, oh, he got this internship because of a contact, or he got this because of that. But the end result, at the end of the day, in fact, a lot of people used to ask me once the journal was going, and I was maybe it was 3-4 years old, that, can you help us? You've got people on the board. And I remember you were also once kind enough to assist me with an internship, I think at one of the firms you were in, I think Paras Kohad, or if I'm not wrong. So I think, and then, I would tell people, I mean, you asked me for a favor, I'll be very happy to assist you, because I'm also sometimes in the same boat, and I also ask people, so if I can help you, definitely yes. But then at the end of the day, you have to realize you asking me is also like using a contact. So you have to get that thing over your head and say, oh, you have a contact. You also got your internship because you requested me and I was your contact in that case. So it's important to kind of get that out of your head, because the reality is that this profession works through networking, and the sooner or later you realize this, the better, because you don't realize it in law school. You will see that people, sometimes you might find who don't have a CV as impressive as you might have got a better opportunity. I'm not saying they'll go ahead, but sometimes it does, and networking does play a role in that. And whether you accept the fact or not, I mean, it is a sad truth that marks are not everything. So if somebody feels that, I'm the topper, but I don't have, and therefore I don't need to do this, then he's definitely mistaken, because a person who's average but good at networking might end up doing better than him. And if you don't realize this now, you will realize this once you get into practice, because once you're in practice again, it is networking. How else do you get clients? And that is not just the case of independent practice. Even if you're working in a law firm, you will, as you keep climbing up the ladder and you reach partner level. I keep having discussions with friends and colleagues and batchmates of mine who are today partners at various law schools, and therefore it's you realize that at some point of time they'll expect you to bring in your clients as well. You will have targets, and the firm can't always support you in terms of giving you enough work that you can meet your target with just clients that the firm refers to you. So if you've got that thing right from the very beginning, you kind of start building up a network which helps you. And not only does it help you in terms of getting work, it also helps you in terms of getting a good opening. I mean, if you network and you find someone, maybe he's in a small firm and you get something there, but if tomorrow he moves on, he might take you with him. So, I mean, it's important that you start networking from day one. And how would you do that? You would start attending some of these conferences, these networking conferences. Once you start interning in firm, especially, try and ask your mentors and lawyers whom you're working under over there, because they would be going, especially law firm people, they go to a lot of conferences more than what practitioners in dispute resolution go for. And try and request them if they can take you with them. They may not always be able to take you, because a lot of these conferences are paid conferences, and obviously the firm would not spend on an intern. But a lot of conferences are there where they can take you because maybe they sponsored them and they have an extra seat that which they could kind of therefore they could register you on that. So that is one way of starting. The other is also keep your eyes and ears open. A lot of these conferences do have complimentary entries for students. For example, you have the Singapore International Arbitration Center, SIAC. They have a lot of conferences, and I believe they give complimentary entries if you're a student. So that is one conference which is good, and where you meet a lot of counsels. You have a few moot courts. In fact, I know a lot of students, when they go for moot courts, they prefer the name of the moot court. So it could be maybe a Jessup or a William C. Wiz. But at least when I was in law school, my thinking was different in the sense that at the end of the day, mooting for me was more like a simulation. It was where you can overcome your fears, you can practice. Maybe my level of comfort in a moot court was okay from day one, because I enjoyed public speaking. For somebody, maybe it opens the doors to public speaking. But at the end of the day, it's actually a simulation. And for me, the focus, even when I did a moot court, was not on actually whether it was a Jessup or a William C. Wiss, but a network, a moot court where if I could know who the judges were in terms of their panel or what topic it's on, where some of these moots actually have networking events in the moot court where you get to actually network with judges who are actually lawyers. And some of them do have that. Like, for example, talking about air law, I take part in the Leiden moot. I used to take part as a student. I was a coach. I've been a judge for the last few years. And that's one example where students and judges interact and network and eat their meals together on the sidelines of the moot. So that is an example. I did a moot court which is now discontinued by SIAC again, the SARC Law moot, where again it used to happen in a 5-star hotels, ran for just 3-4 years, but you were interacting with judges who were GCs from various companies. So that is again a platform which you got for networking. So I would think something like that is better than doing a moot court where you're only mooting. But at the end of the day, it is simulation and giving you confidence. It's not that you're becoming a mooter as for life. I mean, you will of course argue, but you're not going to be mooting or judging moot court competitions as a profession. That is something you would do giving back to society. And therefore, if you get a chance to do a moot court where you could interact and network with judges who are lawyers, there is no harm, because they would be very happy to keep in touch with you. And then, of course, if you're traveling, I know it sounds sometimes, question is, how do you look at, again, you're traveling? If, at least with me, if I was traveling, say, anywhere, whether it's overseas or whether it was even in India, if I was traveling, I remember if I was traveling to a place like Bombay, or especially because Bombay, Delhi, I was anywhere from, but Bombay is where a lot of contacts were. So I was traveling for a wedding with my family, or I remember I traveled once to spend New Year's. I used that opportunity because I knew I was staying with my parents, so I didn't have to, I didn't have to worry about figuring a place to stay and things like that. And I used that opportunity to kind of convince my parents that, okay, look, I need half a day where I'm not going to be with you guys. Or if it's a wedding, the wedding's in the evening, I need this first half to myself, because that is where I have people whom I met at conferences and whom I had been in touch over email with. And now you have WhatsApp today as well. My time there was not WhatsApp. WhatsApp makes it even quicker in terms of the response. And I would go and meet them and have a coffee with them. And that kind of makes the meeting more personal, because obviously as a student, you may not want to spend that money to go especially to meet them, which you would end up doing, of course, once you're a lawyer. But that is one way as a student to also kind of make use of the opportunity. You're traveling abroad, London, for instance, and, you've met a couple of contacts who may be based out of London. Take half a day out, go and meet them. It adds value, because that kind of reinforces that connect that you have. And when which contact helps, you don't know. Lawyer contacts whom I was kind enough to make in law school as students, not knowing where they would land up today, many of them have been very helpful to me as a professional.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know that we have met in Bombay and also in Delhi.
In fact, that's how you and I, in fact, I met, because I made that endeavor to connect with people who had written for the journal.
Yeah.
And a couple of, and apart from you, there are 3-4 more people who are actually very good friends of mine, who I became friends with only because they had written for the article, and we kind of kept in touch. And if I was in Bombay, I would make that endeavor to keep in touch. And of course, that does over the course develop into friendship, like, for instance, our friendship, and similarly with others as well.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it's, I think, very important. Networking is very important.
Yeah.
So my advice to law students, of course, is that don't wait and learn the hard way when you're a lawyer. The fact is, it is hard reality. Networking is very important in the legal profession. You may be a topper, but if you think that topping and not networking is going to get you somewhere, I'm sorry, you're mistaken. That is not how it works.
Now, I really tend to agree. What I really liked about your answer was that was very thorough. I have no further questions really in what you said, because you said how to do it, what it is, and gave really useful pointers. So thank you, Vikrant. Now I want to talk to you about LLM, your LLM experience. Can you tell everyone about your LLM experience? Because one of the biggest misconceptions, the questions I get asked, especially from students, is why would you go to the US for an LLM? Like, what does it give you? And the laws are different, and it's not like the English law, which our laws are derived from the English law. So why US, and why did you choose that, and how does the LLM help you? So can you talk a little bit about that?
So first of all, I've in fact done 2 LLMs, the second in aviation law, but I won't get to that now because that's something very niche. But talk about LLMs in the US in general. See, there are 2 reasons why you would be doing an LLM. And this I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about in general from what my analysis has been, having spent my time during LLM. One is that, you're looking at joining a law firm in New York and, working in an international firm. Now, if you're looking at that, then in that case, you need to give the New York bar exam. But your Indian law degree does not allow you to give the New York bar exam. And one of the criteria which to give the bar exam is to cure that defect by doing an LLM. So for some people, doing an LLM is not actually because they want to do an LLM. It is because they want to come and work in America, and for which they have to give the New York bar. And that in turn can only happen if they do an LLM. So LLM is more of a compulsion in order to be eligible to set for the New York bar, because the ultimate goal is to land up at a law firm job at a plush law firm. Law firms, like in America, in many places, are very different from law firms here. I mean, they are less family run, but they work more like investment banks. all over the world and things like that. 4,000 lawyers, and in terms of that, you're working on deals and so on. So that is one reason. So some people will have that in mind when they come for the LLM. Now, when they have that in mind, the subjects they take will also be mostly subjects which are focused in the bar exam, because otherwise you only get a couple of months to prepare, which is very, very little. That time is actually revision time, as what the JDs call it, and not when you're learning the law afresh. And therefore, those students usually pick up American courses. They don't really take international courses because their funda is primarily to kind of be familiar, so that once they complete the LLM, they can start working on their preparation for the bar exam, and they are at par with the JDs in terms of their prep. So the chances of clearing the exam are higher, because that is the main goal. And many of them, of course, take loans for that. So for them, getting a job is really important from that perspective. Now that again is now in that scenario, again, it's not very easy getting a job, because visa restrictions are becoming extreme. Visa restrictions are increasing day by day. I know people who cleared the New York bar where the firm was willing to take them, but because of visa restrictions, they had no options where to come back. So that is also happening. Sometimes, you could get everywhere. You could have cleared the New York bar. The firm is willing to take you, but the visa becomes a problem, because the H-1B1, as I don't know if many of you know, is a sponsored visa where you have to be sponsored. They're limited seats, I think 60,000 seats or something a year, out of which 30,000 is reserved just for IT and things like that. So your firm has to sponsor you. Now, when it comes to sponsoring you, that's when the firm takes a call, and a lot of times the firm prefers sponsoring an international JD student instead, because a lot of students, instead of doing LLM, prefer doing the JD. Or I had a batchmate of mine. She was from Greece, and Greece went through that turmoil the year she did the LLM. She gave the JD exam. She got into Cornell. They treated her LLM because she had studied a lot of American courses as 1 year of first year of JD, and she joined straight away in second year JD, because she realized that could work, because the chances of an international student who's got a JD getting a job are much more. And the reason being, because obviously they have still studied 3 years more of the American courses rather than 1 year. So while of course the same person, may 1 year person having done LLM, they have passed the bar, but again, in terms of knowing the law, they are definitely quicker. They obviously know much more, having spent 3 years. And so therefore, and also what happens is, when you're looking at applying for jobs, now the firms, when they come to campus, the LLM students are not eligible to sit. There's a separate fair that happens for LLM students where you can try your luck, where it's easier getting jobs, except for Indians. The reason being that most of these international firms, American firms, end up giving the LLM students jobs in their respective cities. But because they're there, like for example, a Clifford Chance would probably give a Chinese student a job, but at Shanghai. But now the thing is that because foreign law firms are present in Shanghai, the way of working in Shanghai for Clifford Chance would be similar to New York. The salary structure would probably be a similar kind of a thing. So the LLM student won't mind going back and working there. And even if he's on a loan, he or she can recover that loan very easily. The same for somebody who's, say, a French person. With Indians, that problem again arises is that because foreign law firms are not there in India, for them getting a job gets very difficult, because there are no Indian offices.
And also language requirements.
Correct.
I don't know whether you had this situation when you sat for the job fair, but there were some 200 jobs.
I didn't. You didn't say.
Okay. There were some 200 jobs posted, 200 plus jobs posted on the website, and only 4 jobs we were eligible to sit, because most of them you had to know Mandarin or Arabic or French or Spanish or Portuguese. And udhar hi ho gaya. Everybody, all of us are out of the race. Forget all of the other things that you said was also very, very valid. That foreign law firms are not available present here. Some of them have these best friend agreements and all with some of the bigger law firms.
But then you are kind of, you need to apply independently here. It's not
exactly.
the same thing.
It's
you're
not.
Still working.
Yeah.
And also the thing is that when you're doing the 3-year JD program, if these firms come for internships, you get selected in the first, then you do something called a summer associate internship, and they usually do it and for a couple of years, and then they usually get the PPO in law school as well. Sorry, you were saying something. I think I interrupted you.
No, I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. So therefore, so this would be one category of where you're doing the LLM to basically cure a defect to do the job. Although if you're very focused, my advice would be, think of it, maybe try and do the JD itself, which is of course a 3-year course. But if you're 100%
I
sure
agree.
you're
I
going to
agree
live
with
there,
you.
then
And
chances are higher.
Much higher, and I think you do get credits for the courses. Not only that you've done, you also get credit for some courses that you've done in your local law degree or your basic law degree. You may not need to do all of them for your first year.
So therefore, that is one category. The second category is where you're looking to do the LLM, like just getting the brand name, and eventually you want to come back. Of course, that is what the category I would put myself in, where I was looking for a brand name and getting the exposure of just working, of just seeing what it is being abroad in terms of studying and interacting with working professionals who are based abroad. So that was my idea. And then coming back and using that brand name. Of course, trust, if you feel that using that brand name is going to give you a job, it's not always going to help you, especially if you're in litigation and not corporate. In corporate, to some extent, it might still help if you've done some hardcore courses on specific issues, like maybe a project finance or an M&A, and that's the practice area you're looking to join here. But in litigation, definitely it's not going to help. But yeah, if you're looking at the brand name and the exposure, and you don't mind spending that time and money, then yes, it's worth it. So these are the two categories I would put in terms of how people take a call of whether they want to do an LLM in the US or not.
Again, you gave me a very comprehensive answer, so thank you very much. Now, you mentioned the second LLM. What is the second LLM? When did you get it, and how on earth do you have the time with your workload in the Supreme Court to do this?
So my second LLM was an LLM in aviation law. I went to Leiden, so I was very keen on doing an aviation law LLM. And Leiden University and McGill are the only two universities that offer you that. So in the beginning, I thought of applying to Leiden because I had been associated with them, and unofficially, I knew if I would apply, my chances of getting in were quite high. But when I took advice from people, they said, if you're choosing between Cornell and Leiden, then you go for Cornell, because it's obviously generally more general, and especially since I was not sure what the scope of aviation in India was, at least back then. So I did Cornell. Now, while I was in Cornell, of course, I was still in touch with people from Leiden, and they told me, that we have something called the same LLM program we offer to working professionals. If you've got a 5-year experience in the aviation sector, you can do that same LLM over a 2-year period. You have to go there for some mandate, for your minimum attendance and for some of your exams. But a lot of it, because it's online, you can do online in terms of your lectures get recorded and sent to you, your projects, and you can do sitting here. But of course, you have to go there as well. So you have to make 3-4 trips a year, each time for 15-20 days over 2 years. So you're part of 2 classes, but it is the same regular LLM. So they said, we are willing to, if you're willing to do that. So I said, I can't do the full LLM when I finish Cornell. I want to start work. They said, we'll offer you this. And they were kind enough to, offer me a waive of my 5-year work that you need for a hardcore aviation professional. I did not have to pay for my food and lodging every time I would come over those visits to Leiden. So that really helped me out, and I felt I could, fund, and then I didn't have to pay the full fee for the first year as well. So that made it very easy for me that I could take care of it on my own. And the university was kind enough to offer me an interest-free loan, which I had to repay at my convenience in 2 years. So they were very kind. So I said, if they've gone out of their way, then, I definitely need to do the program. So that's how I ended up doing it while I was working here. I would go back and forth. And luckily, in litigation, you have the luxury of the codification. So that is what I used, the code break, to work on my papers and things like that. So yeah, that is the LLM I did in aviation law from the Leiden University.
So now tell us, what is aviation law? Because most of us don't know it.
So aviation law is again very multifaceted. You have a branch called aviation financing law, which is basically financing of aircraft. So tomorrow, you want to lease a plane, you want to buy a plane, may want to buy a plane and then sell it and lease it back. So these are various modes. Then how do you finance the aircraft? Sometimes you're buying the aircraft minus engine. So that's covered under a broad thing of aircraft finance. So that is one aspect of aviation law. One is, of course, the private international law, aviation law, which is basically disputes of, say, something like a passenger vis-a-vis an airline. Say it could be instances like denied boarding, could be covered in that, or COVID, and people were fighting for refund of tickets. So those kind of things come under the private international air law concept. Public international air law is, maybe if you're joining the ICAO, which is the UN body for civil aviation, based in Montreal, as well as 7 other regional offices that they have, and you're working on maybe drafting a treaty or something like that, or you're working with maybe the ministry, the aviation ministry of a particular country, or you may be working with the airport operator of the country, and you're kind of working on policies related issues, getting legislations into place, maybe getting your country to get a domestic legislation to enforce a treaty that you have signed. So therefore, that is public, that is there. Then of course, competition law in aviation is again another aspect, because you have a lot of times have airline mergers that happen, where you have 2 airlines merging. In India, we had Jet Sahara. I remember Kingfisher and Jet also getting into some sort of agreement, which kind of had to face the anti-competitive watchdogs muster. So you keep having all these. I believe Tata's, after buying Air India, they are facing the competition watchdog in Singapore. And competition laws pretty much are similar. Again, the basic principles are similar world over. So competition law in aviation is one aspect. Again, airlines do a lot of these frequent flyer alliances, code share agreements, so whether they have an anti-competitive effect or not. So competition and antitrust law, competition law, and aviation is again another aspect. So these are broadly some of the areas that we have in terms of aviation law.
And what is it that you practice in? Like, what is your...
So in aviation, my practice is more on the private international air law side. Primarily there, yeah, private international air law.
So you help mostly on the dispute resolution side.
Yeah, no, dispute resolution primarily, yes, because
policy and advice.
Because when consumers have issues, they want it resolved. They will come to you. We want a ticket refund, or the airline may be coming to you that some passenger sued us, but we're challenging it in court, or you help us settle it. Things like that. It could be a denied boarding. It could be a compensation. COVID saw a lot of increase in competition, and we did a lot of work on that front. So yeah.
And now you spoke so much about your experience in dispute resolution, and one of the things that I really want to do through this platform is to just bring to the fore simple mistakes that people make, and with just like the right knowledge, you can save yourself a lot of heartache and also a lot of money.
So I think one important thing, especially if you're a first generation lawyer, I think that's what I would like to model my advice on, because the others don't, the non-first generation lawyers don't need it. They already know what path they have to follow. It is, look at the experience you're getting and not the name. And I'll tell you why. What I took a decade to learn, my associates have learned it in 2 years. Now, what do I mean when I say that? When I worked, I went like the regulars, looking for people to work with. You were also looking at a brand name. Of course, working with a brand name, you get immense knowledge. And that is an area which you definitely should get to work with a senior counsel or somebody, especially if you want to do independent practice. But if you think, you'll work with a senior counsel for 5 years and then start independent, it's not very easy. Because you don't have a shop waiting for you. You don't know, you will have to you may not have a clerk from day one. With a senior counsel, you may never have seen how filing is done. You probably, his briefs come through law firms, you don't know how your files are managed in court. You've never really gone scouting for clients, so you don't know how work comes.
Yeah.
Now, and that's something I took a long time to learn, but that's something, at least in my office, we kind of let our colleagues learn that from day one. So my juniors, rather I would not use the term juniors, I would say my associate advocates, I would say, because they are much more than juniors. They get a chance to argue in court. So that way they kind of get over their fears, and they know if they want to get into a solicitor kind of a work, or they want to get into a barrister kind of a practice. So we give them the chance to argue. Of course, I won't say they start off from Supreme Court from day one. They start off observing matters, start off with smaller matters in smaller courts. But yes, my juniors, or again, it's a wrong word I use, my associate advocates today do argue in Supreme Court as well. One of them got a chance to appear in the NCLT. I was on a flight, that a matter suddenly came. The date got preponed. It was given on a date. It happened to be a Sunday, and it got preponed to another date when I will happen to be on a flight, and they got to know about one day before. My associate advocate requested for a passover, and I told him because stakes were high, but I had trained him well that he could appear if the judge didn't allow. The judge said, sorry, make use of this chance, your senior is not here. He argued, we won the matter. In fact, we got to know about the order was reserved, we got to know about it through live law. So eventually, over 2 years, my associate advocates have got a chance where they've appeared right from the lower courts to Supreme Court. And so they've kind of overcome that fear. They accompany me on client visits, and they see how. And by client visits, I mean not just matters where we are briefing counsel, where we are discussing an ongoing matter with the client, but even where we are doing a business development meeting with the client. So we try and take them where we can, and we take them for briefings with senior counsels. They spend days. They do filing as well at times, so they know if there's no clerk, how is filing done. They even put the files in the record room in the racks. So much so, if required, they are trained to manage the telephone at the reception and clear the litter from the pantry and put it outside the office where the litter is kept of the building. So they've learned everything. So they know tomorrow if somebody leaves my chamber, he knows, okay, if I want to do independent practice, I have seen how it's done. I know I'm confident of arguing. Yes, my research skills are fine, but I know I have to invest in something like an SEC. Am I willing to do that? I know this is the minimum infrastructure I require. Can I do that? Can I make sure I have a ready-made big scanner today to meet a client's demand of sending him something overnight? Because today clients with technology evolving, you can't tell them, okay, tomorrow I will go to court and give it to the scanning guy and he will get it by the evening. So you look, okay, I know I need a machine. I know this much computers. Today it's all virtual. I know I need this many screens. I might even require a small TV screen in my room. So I know in terms of infrastructure, this is what I need to spend in. I know, okay, I may be able to afford only one person. Do I need to go for a high-end clerk or for a guy who's 80% a clerk, but 20% can help me in support staff in the office? He can manage my reception and he can clean up my pantry. And tomorrow he's on leave. I know I have to do it myself. Can I do it? So there he knows exactly tomorrow, can he do that or not? And if he says, yes, I'm confident, but, it's not very easy with these other things. Let me join a firm for some time. Maybe that's a better option for me. Or let me join a counsel's chamber. So he kind of gets that idea in a good 2 years to make that choice. That if he wants to do independent counsel practice, it is not just about that, but he knows the question will come, where do I get my work from? What are the expenses I require? Do I have the money for that? Do I have the infrastructure in place? Minimum that I require? What is it? So, things like that. If today, how much support staff can I afford? How much do I need vis-a-vis how much can I afford? If I can afford one person, tomorrow that person's on leave, am I equipped to manage on my own? That's very important because that is what I've seen people, including myself. Maybe my time, we never had a batch that had passed out. We didn't have people to guide us. But again, this person came to me during COVID. My juniors, a lot of them came to me during COVID, and because they were looking at something or the other, but they hung on because they felt, that these other question marks they would get to answer only after spending 2 years in a chamber like mine, which is a first generation chamber as compared to established chamber.
Okay, lovely. You've again given me any question I ask you give me like really long and nice answers. But now I want to ask you a similar question, but from a everyday layperson point of view, the sense that you have, because you're in dispute resolution, you've been dealing with a lot of, let's call them consumers or everyday people with problems. My experience so far in life has been that because people don't know their basic risks, they don't know their basic rights, what they have, what are, and they don't know what things mean. Like when you sign a contract, what does it mean versus when you sign an MOU and stuff like that. Just basic stuff. They are not able to plan their risks. They're not able to take better decisions. So and I've seen this across every practice area, not just mine, but so what are some of the things that you feel that everyday people make, like simple mistakes that they make, that with just a little better knowledge or a little change in thinking, they can just make much better decisions?
So I think it's very important to be thorough with your contracts that you sign, because a lot of times disputes happen because you don't know what you've signed, and then in that case you kind of tend to overlook that, and then which is why you're in a soup. For instance, if you sign an agreement which has an arbitration clause, and it says it will have, say, an arbitration clause, and it will say, okay, if you want to terminate the contract, you have to follow certain protocols. Maybe you raise a objection when you're paying the bill, that that the goods are not in conformity or something like that. And a lot of times they don't take those contracts very seriously, and they end up signing them. And when they come, all those stages have been foregone, and it's very difficult, because at the end of the day, the court goes by the contract.
Yeah.
Or for that matter, somebody signed a shareholders agreement blindly, without realizing that whether he had a first right of refusal, whether he did not. They just sign it uh, uh, as if they are terms and conditions. Of course, they are terms and conditions, but they're not like terms and conditions where you're just giving your car at the valet and
Yeah.
taking a valet ticket and keeping that without seeing the terms at the back, or buying an air ticket from an airline but not reading the terms and conditions which you've agreed to. So that's something very important. It's very important for them to be thorough with the knowledge. I would say it is important you invest in a legal counsel. I had a client once where the legal counsel he was someone who had no idea what used to be happening, was of no assistance to me. And when I spoke to his chairman, he said, I said the previously counsel you had was much better. She was more hands-on. He says, our budget's gone down and we can't afford somebody like her. So I said, see, it's very simple. I said, you see, you can't afford it, then you're going to in the long run suffer, because this guy's not going to follow up contracts. And eventually you're going to be paying that same amount in litigation in court. So, so therefore it's very important to make sure you invest that money. Try and cut that spending on maybe somebody else in the company. Or if you can't, or put somebody on a retainership basis in your company. But it's important to spend on a good counsel who can apprise you of your rights and liabilities, and who acts like a regulatory officer in the company, who can, make sure all the compliances, who works like a compliance officer. It's very important for a lawyer to have a good lawyer who can don the role of something called a compliance officer, to make sure your compliances are in checks and balances. I've had a situation where the guy doesn't even know his returns aren't paid, and his company's also been struck off the records. The matter came to NCLT, he had no idea. And then he found out the returns are never paid.
Oh my.
So it's very important to be hands-on and not let go and invest in the legal space. You need to invest in a good in-house counsel who can be your chief compliance officer.
Everyone I've asked this question, without exception, 100% of the people who have come on the podcast have said this one thing as the biggest mistake that everyday people make. And it's not us as lawyers tooting our horn or trying to get more work. It's just that it pains you when you see, when you get clients and they are like the example that you gave, this guy's company has been struck off record. Like, this is something you worked your entire life for, and then it's just gone because you in a way were penny wise pound foolish, right? You don't realize the risk that is associated with non-compliance. You don't realize the risk that is associated with a bad decision.
Correct.
And everything that you work for can just disappear like that. Ultimately, we all live within the bounds of the law. So I'm always surprised at how this seems to be the number one thing that all the people who appear on the podcast say. And I hope people take it more seriously than what they're taking today. Just to wrap up this one this segment before we go on to our last segment, what do you think are the gaps in today's legal system? And for someone like us who are already in the system, and also for young lawyers and law students who are coming in, what do you think we can practically do to help? Because we all know that our system is overburdened to the point of almost exhaustion, breakage. So what do you think we can all do?
Well, obviously that's a good question and a difficult question to answer, because having a solution is not very easy for this. Because, for instance, if you take first generation lawyers coming into litigation, a lot of counsels want to litigate. A lot of them who work in corporate firms have like to litigate, but they say we don't have the luxury to get into that because either we don't belong to a metro city, or we have to bank on ourselves and we don't have support from the house. So for something like that, of course, yes, I believe bar councils, including the Bar Council of India and state bar councils, are coming up with a fund to support lawyers. And I think it's important that senior counsels also, have a benchmark, because see, what happens is that senior counsels, many of them, I won't take names, but sometimes some of them may not be very generous when it comes to remunerating them, because the old school thought is saying is that, you're here to learn, not to earn. You're still a student. But the point is that, the thing is, if you're in a counsel's chamber, today, a lot of times, you will be like, okay, but I can never see. If you're in a law firm, you can still make it like a retirement home. But if you're in a counsel's chamber, none of these chambers really have that thing of being lucrative in terms of staying there your whole life. I mean, you have to move on, whether it is joining a firm or getting into independent practice. And I think that is partially because also the whole concept of where you have, even though we don't officially have the solicitor barrister system, but in most metro cities, you have the concept of solicitor, the law briefing the counsel. So then obviously, a lot of counsels don't take the chamber work very seriously because they know it's all coming from there. But some states, the non-metro cities, of course, like I'll give you an instance. I practice in both Delhi and Chandigarh. Now in Chandigarh, there is no concept per se of a law firm. If you want to engage a senior counsel for a matter, you will go to him, he will do the full matter. Of course, he will get his colleague, his junior, to draft the matter for him. If the client wants him to settle, he would settle it, otherwise the junior would draft it and file it in his name. And he would then, of course, appear. So it's a one-stop shop where the junior also gets good exposure, and maybe in a system like this, he could probably stick on for longer, because he's the important eyes and ears for his senior. And then in something like that, the senior also, if he gets senior and he sticks on, the senior doesn't mind him sticking on, because he's been drafting for him for a while. The senior knows, okay, if I'm wetting the draft, I don't have to have too many corrections, and I'm happy to give him a fee for that. So then you also come on to a fee sharing with your juniors. Now, the difficulty in a place like Delhi, what I have seen, is that in Delhi, that model is not very feasible, because in Delhi, if you go to a senior counsel also, he will tell you to go to a law firm, get them to draft it, and then come back to him. So then in that case, so now in a situation like that, obviously a senior's chamber, the juniors are not really drafting the work, because the senior has said, you go to a law firm and come. So then your value in the firm obviously is less. Some of the seniors still rely a lot on their juniors in terms of the research and making the notes. But that extra advantage of, drafting and maybe working with your senior on a fee sharing basis, that thing is lesser, I feel, in Delhi chambers, from my personal experience, because I've briefed a lot of counsels. I've seen it may be lesser because they don't take up the matters directly. Not that they do in Delhi, in Chandigarh as well, but there they give it to their juniors. So then it indirectly comes through their own people. So I think it's very important also having a model in your office where you can remunerate someone, that tomorrow somebody joins the chamber and he wants to stay on, he can do that. But that's a model I have adopted in my office. In our office, we take up arguing, drafting, everything, filing, on a lot of matters which I feel I can't put in 100% best my effort, or I would only be able to, maybe spend limited time. I put my juniors on a 50% fee sharing basis on that matter. So I'll tell my juniors, okay, again, juniors is a bad word. I'll tell my associate advocate, okay, this matter is, you're doing this with me, but this is a fee sharing matter. So he gets incentivized to work harder. Where I will tell him, I will only argue the matter. You're going to be drafting it. You're going to be doing everything. At best, I will vet it for you and give you the pointers. It's your baby. You are handling it. So he knows he's on a fee sharing basis. He's also incentivized to kind of perform better. And at the same time, he gets an added source of revenue in addition to what you would anyway pay him, the stipend, as you call it, that you would be paying him every month.
Good points. New points, actually, something I have not thought of, especially the fee sharing part. And I don't think we do that much in Bombay. I'm not sure. I haven't heard of it.
In fact, in my office, we have 3 categories. How we divide their remuneration is in 3 parts. So whatever their retainership per month, the stipend we pay them is also not fixed. Some portion is fixed, some is variable. And the reason why it is variable is we keep it based on the inflow that we get. And another reason for keeping it variable is that the counsel should get used to mentally be prepared that I will never have a fixed income my whole life if I'm going to do litigation. So therefore, while maybe on an average with sir I make X amount of money, but what I am guaranteed is only X minus 5. The remaining could be plus 1, 2, 3, 4. It could vary.
Yeah.
And then the third component is we try putting them every month on some matter on a fee sharing basis, whatever. It could be a good matter, depending of course on the client. It could be a premium client where you are charging your regular fee, where of course 50% he makes a good fee kind of a thing. Or it could be a smaller matter as well, where he still makes something and he's incentivized to do. So, yeah.
Nice. I've never heard of this, but it sounds like a good system to have. And it's clearly working for you and your juniors because they want to stick on. So it's good. We've sort of wrapped up. I want to go to the last part, which is just like a fun part, where we get to know you much better, not just we, like everybody who is listening. So it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I ask you 5 of something, 4 of something, 3 of something, like that. So starting with the first, because you are honestly one of the few people I know who do so many things in one lifetime. So give me 5 productivity tips. How do you manage to do it all? Like 5 things. Even you can tell me about apps or stuff like that, which also help you.
So number 1, I keep a calendar. It is very important to maintain your thing on a calendar. And I work, it sounds insane, but I work on a time slot system. So everything I do on a particular day, including when I'm going to have my meals, is all fixed in a calendar. And I have to tend to stick to that slot in order to finish off something. You can't be just being here and being there. So if I'm spending time with family, it will be slotted on the calendar that this much is my family time. If I am doing court, okay, it's on my calendar, this time to this time is court. In between, if I know I have time, I will slot something maybe in between, something like a call with somebody or things like that. So I kind of put things on a slot system where I kind of tend to make things happen. Now, I tend to work out in the morning and go to the gym. So if I'm gymming, instead of hearing music, I would probably hear NDTV News, which works live on their app.
Or so this podcast.
Or this podcast. So therefore, if I want to listen to some interview of someone, I love listening to interviews, podcasts like these of senior advocates and judges and people whom I could take a lesson from. So I like to listen to this when I'm on my treadmill, for instance. That saves time rather than coming back and then, okay, this is my news time to watch the news. If I'm in the car, I'll probably be reading the newspaper while I'm in the car rather than spending half an hour at home reading. Because in the car, you have limited things you can do. The newspaper would probably be in my hand when I'm in court. So if I'm waiting outside for a matter and I have 5 minutes, I could glance through it. So I'm telling you an example of how I would probably have calls with clients if I have for that day slotted calls. I would have those slotted. And today with video conferencing as well, I even do some of my conferences in the car if I don't require papers. And, I can do it where I know I can just do it where I just need to be on the call. So I try and use these kind of things to kind of save time. I pretty much, like I said, I put things on a calendar and that kind of helps me organize my day. And I try and do as much as I can, especially when I'm on the move, all the unproductive so-called things. So I kind of slot my calendar up pretty much to achieve as much as I can. I think that's very important to do.
Yeah, I think planning out your work is just one part, but working out your plan is, for me, the more difficult part. So
I try and put realistic plans. If I know I can't achieve something, I would not put it on my calendar for that day, or I would put it on a slot over 2 days. And then, like you're saying, implementing it. If I'm with me, the thing is, even if I'm traveling, again, for me, if I'm on a flight, and of course, if I don't have anything slotted for that day, or I'm going well as per my schedule, I would probably be watching a movie. But yes, I would not shy away if something has to be done. I would be very happy to kind of
open up your laptop and do some work
and do it on the flight. Or for that matter, I was traveling. I remember I went to Chandigarh for a matter once, and I drove down because the morning flight, there's only one morning flight currently post-COVID at 5:30. After the next flight is at 1:30, and 5:30 means you have to
wake up at 2 o'clock. Yeah.
So that didn't seem practical. The Shatabdi is very comfortable, but that leaves only at 7:40 and reaches at 11. And in Chandigarh, the court sits at 10. So I drove down because at least even if I leave at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, at 5, which means I can get up at 4:30, get ready and leave by 5. I reach by 9, and those 4 hours again I can sleep in the car. Now, of course, in the morning, I know at that time, I probably would anyway not be doing anything in that early hour. So going by car worked perfect for me. Now, after the matter, the client had already flown down the previous night because she didn't want to take the 5:30 flight either. And in the evening, we finished the hearing. We realized we had to kind of work together on a hearing, and sit together and probably work on an application, which had to be finalized by that evening, so that the next day it could be filed. Now, I technically already was supposed to drive back after court at 5 and reach at 9, which means I would have had to, do it late night, which would affect my productivity for the next day. So I left my car there. Straight away, arrangements were made by the office. I flew with the client to Chandigarh. We reached the airport, sat in the airline lounge. We drafted it sitting in the lounge because you have to go 2 hours early. And we had that luxury because none of us had luggage. Sat, finalized it on the lounge, did our conference on the flight together.
Lovely.
When I reached Delhi. So of course, it was that proposition of leaving my car behind and flying. But that's what allowed me. So by 9 o'clock when I reached Delhi, that extra point of doing my conference, doing my drafting, everything was already done.
And your car also reached Delhi eventually?
No, my car, of course, the driver brought it separately.
Yeah.
But when I reached Delhi, my point was I was already at par with my schedule.
Yeah, amazing.
And I didn't have to go haywire. So that's an example of how you need to kind of, plan yourself to get it done.
Yeah, so you're giving me good ideas about working out my plan, because I think that's where I struggle the most. Especially after I had kids, I struggle the most. Okay, 4 books that
Don't ask me.
4 books that you'd recommend to anyone to read. Need not be law books, but...
So I have a mixture of both. One is a law-related book. It's a book which Mr. Diljit Titus, the managing partner of Titus and Company, recommended, and I immediately bought it. It's published by the American Bar Association on how to build a law practice. Very interesting book for a first-generation lawyer, and you can buy it online. That's one read, I would say. Another read is a book, I can't remember the publisher, again recommended to me by Mr. Titus. What Clients Love. It's called What Clients Love. It's a book with a green cover page. I haven't been going to office because the code breaks, so I don't know the publisher name, but What Clients Love is there, and maybe you can get in touch with me if you need the publisher's name. I could then check it out and send it to you. That's again a very good book of what a client looks at. So these are books which are not, they're not law related, and yet they are books.
Yeah, very relevant.
Relevant. So that is there. And then I really like this book called The Ambani Sons, which is a book written on the Ambani brothers and Dhirubhai Ambani. And that was a very good book. And I learned a very valid lesson when I was reading that book, which was where Anil Ambani once, his father told him, son, you're 105 kgs or something like that. I have money to buy you everything in the world and I cannot, but there's one thing I can't buy you, and that's health. And that is when Anil Ambani actually overnight became a fitness freak that you read about him. Yeah. And so similarly, that book has a lot of these motivating lessons, The Ambani Sons. So that is another book I would recommend. So on the back of my mind, I have 3 books right now, actually. These 3 books are what I would recommend.
Okay.
Yeah, these 3, yeah.
Now you've actually given...
Yes, sorry, I do have a 4th book. And the 4th book is something I think which everybody would recommend is Before Memory Fades by Falina Raman. I think that's a book every lawyer would recommend.
You are the first person to recommend that book on the podcast.
I already have my notes made in that book, in fact. That's how regularly I use that book.
Oh, wow. Okay. You are the first person the most recommended book on the podcast is To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay. And that's like almost every other person has recommended To Kill a Mockingbird.
Another very interesting book which I read recently is The 7 Legal Eagles. Written by this journalist from Economic Times, Indu Bhan, whom I know because of practicing in the Supreme Court as well. Yeah. So Indu's written a good book on the legal eagles, which comprises of 7 lawyers.
I think I saw it in Kitab Khana.
So that's also very, because some of the stories by the counsels are quite...
interesting, is it?
Interesting and mesmerizing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you've said a lot of things. You've actually given a lot of practical tips, but I still have to ask you 3 tips for young lawyers or law students. Like 3.
I think always believe in yourself, do what your heart tells you to do, and work hard. Results will follow. I don't know when, but at some point of time, I feel they will follow.
And the third one?
And the third is what a saying by Dr. A.P.J. Kalam, which I've always believed in. Dreams are those that never let you sleep. They should keep you awake. So if you have a dream, don't sleep over it. Start working to implementing it. Only then will that become a reality.
Yeah. It's like speaking directly to me. Like I finally had the courage to do this after COVID.
India Law Journal is an example of that. I'll be very honest
of course.
if I speak for myself.
Yeah. Lovely. 2 life lessons that you have learned.
One, of course, you need to understand that, there will be ups and downs. So while you could be having ups, downs could also come at any point of time. So you need to make sure you're level-headed. If you're having good billings one month, make sure again you're level-headed, because while one month you may have had a good month, the next month you may also be earning nil. So it's very important to kind of be level-headed. That's a very important tip that one has to keep in mind, especially if you're in litigation, because you're like a daily wage earner. And the second would be that it's believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Only you need to believe in yourself that you can do it. If you don't believe in yourself and you lose faith, then it will be very difficult for you.
Yeah.
And do not worry about what others say or what it's going to mean to others. You are in something for yourself. Think how you would react, how it would affect you, not how it would affect the others. I think that's what somebody should keep in mind.
Yeah. I like I said, you're speaking directly to me. I feel like I feel like these are things that I need to hear, which is I think the greatest gift of doing this podcast. I feel like I'm having these conversations and suddenly something that today that you have said or other conversations the guests have said is like something I needed to hear. And finally, the best advice that you've ever received.
Well, it's very hard to think the best advice. I've received a lot of good advice from a lot of good people, including my family. But I think the best advice I have received is the saying of Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, that do not let dreams just go away. Do not dream them, live them, and be awake to implement them.
Okay, this is like the tagline of this episode, because it's very true. I'm so thankful to you, Vikrant, for giving your time so generously.
Thanks, Jenna, for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.